Welcome back to Simple C10. Thanks for joining us again. So the air ride is installed on this 66 C10. Everything is done. I'm only waiting on the drive shaft to get here to put the truck back on the ground to see what it looks like on the pavement. Cannot wait. That'll be next week. Can't wait for the grand reveal of it. But while we wait for that, I finally got a warm day here. It's been snowing, 20 degrees. Well, it's 45. I'll take it back out in the garage today because I want to install this LA Electrical alternator. And this is a 200 amp alternator. What's currently on mine is 100 amp. So at idle, it's running about 65 amps or lower. So I need a lot more than that to run my air ride stuff. So on idle, this will run you about 85 to 90, but at full drive speed, this is going to get you your max of 200. So in order for this to charge at 200 amps, there's a couple other upgrades that you have to do. I've got to run a thicker cable. This is 4 gauge. I'm only going to run this wire about 4 or 5 feet. So I've read 4 gauge will get you to the max peak. If it doesn't after testing, then I'll just upgrade this wire to a 2 or a 0. But that's what I'm going to use for this. I bought these nice little connectors for this and for the battery that are clamped in. That's going to make it look nice and clean. And currently right now, my wire from the battery to the alternator is a tiny wire. I mean, it's like a 10 gauge wire, so small. So this is alone gonna upgrade it big time. Right now, the wire that runs from my battery to my alternator has a split in it that runs my headlights and all those other things up front, the fan and all those. So what I plan to do is run 4 gauge to this splitter, and then run the splitter to the alternator, and then have one of these running to a relay for my lights and other things. Kind of the same way it's set up now, because I thought, why run 2 different wires all the way to the battery when really it's going to be pulling from this charge anyway. So that's the plan. If it doesn't work out, I can always take this connection off of whatever this is running and then just run it straight, the wire straight into here, straight to the alternator, and it's the exact same thing as if I would have had one long wire. But I'm going to walk you through the different steps that I use. This is my first time ever using a LA Electrical alternator, so we'll see how that goes. It's the only one that I could find in Chrome that wasn't back ordered for a super long time. Summit has one that was a little bit cheaper than this option, but it's back ordered right now and there's no estimated time that it's going to be available. So I'm going to have the link in the description for all these different parts. Be sure to use those links. Those are affiliate links, most of them, and I may get a little bit of change from that. So what I want to do first is uninstall the alternator that's currently on the truck. I want to hook up this alternator, use the wire that's already ran out there, the small wire, and just hook it up and then crank up the truck and make sure this is a working unit. Once I figure that out and it's good to go, then I'm going to start doing all my wiring to the new alternator from the battery. So the reason I'm really upgrading all this is I currently have vintage air, I've got the Bluetooth radio, I've got the air ride compressors, and then you just have your headlights and all the other things that require electrical. So you're going to need more than just a factory alternator. It's going to be pulling a lot of volts from you, so I don't want my battery to go dead. So instead of just installing another battery, what I want to do is upgrade my alternator and see what I can get out of my factory setup before I install a secondary battery. So now I'm just going to walk you through uninstalling the alternator, installing the new alternator on there, kind of the steps that it takes, and then we'll try it out. So before I start uninstalling this alternator, I just want to walk you through a couple different steps because it's going to be hard to see once I start. So I'm going to loosen up this bolt right here. I'm going to unscrew this bolt here, and then I'm going to loosen up that bolt right there. And then that'll give me enough slack where this alternator will move over just a little bit. I can take the belt off, and then I will unscrew the wire from the back, the ground and the power wire, and then I'll just take this off and put the new one on there. Ooh, yeah, that sounds good. Puts a smile on your face. So we got the alternator installed. I was checking the amps just with the factory wiring and everything. And as I went up in RPMs, I could see it put me over 3.5 with the compressor running and everything. So I'm excited to see when we get this 4-gauge wire running all the way to the battery, what kind of upgrade that's going to cause. So yeah, I want to focus on now is just installing the 4-gauge wire from the alternator all the way to the battery. So what I'm going to do first is just uninstall all the wiring currently going to the battery and then run the new wire all the way to the alternator. Now I do plan on moving the horn and the fan relay and all that kind of stuff actually to behind this panel right here. So I'm going to take this panel off and I'm going to see how I can wire up some stuff right behind this to hide all the wiring. So this is the stuff that I'm going to try to hide behind this panel right here. You've got the horn, you've got the fan relay, the headlight relays, all that kind of stuff. I'm going to try to do away with that and hide some of it to clean up this firewall. I'll probably tape off this section and just put some fresh black satin paint on there to match the rest. But I'm going to undo this tiny wire that's currently going to the alternator, and I'm going to upgrade that all the way to the battery with that 4-gauge. And I'm going to run it through the hole that's there already, that little section, and then we'll just walk through how we're going to rewire this. I bought the splitter to run this wire to behind this little cap, and then put that splitter on there to then put my relays connected, because that's currently how it is. If you trace this battery wire, it actually goes to this little hub right here that a lot of things are getting power from. I hate that design. It works, but it doesn't look pretty at all. So we're going to upgrade all that. We're going to try to hide some of that stuff. I might use some riv nuts or find a way that you can't see a lot of the screws from the back side of that panel. But let's just start diving in. Let's start taking wires off, take this bracket off here, and see what kind of options that we have. I'm not the greatest electrician or anything like that, but I know how to wire. Once I get the wires tidy, I'm going to cover them in some more of this wire loom and get everything looking clean. So I'd already taken some time before this to clean up the wires coming from the firewall all the way here. I've wire loomed them, but I'm going to take a lot of that off and just redo it. And now that I'm running new wire, tuck everything nicely and just try to get an overall look. This is the finishing touches. Even though everything works right now, some people may say, well, hey, it's all working. You fire up the truck, it's great. Well, I want to make sure that this battery and this alternator puts enough volts out to cover the AC, the compressors, the Bluetooth radio, the headlights, all the different things that we have going on this truck. And hopefully it does. If it doesn't, then we have all the components we need to upgrade to a second battery in the back. But if it does work, then that saved us a little bit of money. If it doesn't, then we'll be ready to upgrade and install that battery in the back. So I'm going to be removing this old hot wire and this old ground, because on this is a one wire alternator, so it only requires the power from the battery and it doesn't require the ground. The ground is actually through the bracket, so we won't need that anymore, which is good. The less wires the better. But just in comparison, I wanted to show you why we're upgrading. So this little wire, no matter if you have a 200 amp alternator or not, this little wire can only carry so much. So we're going to upgrade to this 4 gauge. And some people do 0 gauge or 2 gauge. 4 should be good enough for what we're doing. And if not, we can always upgrade to a bigger wire. It's not going to be a big deal. But just check out the difference in that. So if you're going to upgrade your alternator, I encourage you to upgrade this wire. Or even if you're not upgrading your alternator, go ahead and do a wire. It's called a big 3 upgrade, where you upgrade this wire, the ground that goes from the battery to the body, and the power that goes to the starter. Upgrade all those different connections so you get the best bang from your alternator. So let's continue on. Let's remove all these old wires. Let's get all this stuff out of the way, and let's start running our new wire and see how it turns out. Go ahead and take off this horn. I've got it removed from the relay, and I'm just really trying to trace where all these wires are going, and do I need them? What are they doing? What's a power? What's a ground? And trying to make this whole setup more simple. And so far so good. I'm gonna go ahead and take off all the loom from here all the way down to there to trace where a couple of these wires are going. Once I do that, I'll get an understanding of what I want to do and what needs to be mounted on the inside here, because I can take this wire down here and I can drill a hole in the side of here to run the wires over here. So that's not going to be a problem. That'll be an easy thing, but I need to figure out which wires I need to run to the back side first. So far, the things that I removed weren't needed on the truck. Some of those things from the factory are needed, but whoever on this truck before me did a American wire harness upgrade, so it put the relays for the headlights and all the stuff that I thought I would be putting here, that's all under the dash. So that's good. The only relay I'm gonna have is the fan relay, and then a horn relay if I want to run the horn. So this is the horn line. That's why I wanted to go ahead and mark this for what it was. So there's that, and I'll just connect that back on the back side here whenever I get there. So what I'll do is get this area cleaned up and I'll put some paint on it, and then I'll go back and maybe find some of those little inserts that pop into holes of different sizes, and I'll get all those so you don't notice it as much. So I'm going to take all these wires here and I'm going to connect them really tightly, get them ready to be covered, because we're going to go all the way to where the core support is, and we're going to drill a hole here and run those wires directly through here. And then I'm going to run them through there, and I'll mount the relays right here. And then I'm going to connect the relays into here. That 4-gauge wire is going to run all the way through the top here and connect into this. And then one of these are going to go to the alternator, and a couple of them will go to the relays for the fan and for the dash. Okay, so all I've done is kind of tape the wires a little bit there just to make them real nice and tight. That way whenever we go to use the wire loom, it's easy to tuck in there. It's going to save us a lot of time. It just looks really good. So I've got them tied together there all the way to right here where we're going to drill a hole, and we're going to run this wiring harness through this right here. I just wanted to pause a second. I got these Milwaukee step drill bits for Christmas. Thanks, Carly, and thanks, Kim. You just saw how easy that cut through. These are amazing. Wow, I've used a lot of these in the builds, but this Milwaukee one, specifically this one, is awesome. So next I'm just going to clean up this area, mask it off, clean it up, get some of the sharp stuff down, and then I'm going to spray just a little bit of spray paint on it. I'm going to mask off the area and then put my grommet in there once the paint is dry, and then run the wires through, and we'll start on the other side with the wiring and everything. So while the paint dries, I'm going to go ahead and take this 4-gauge wire. I've got a couple of the connectors. This left connector I ran my compressors to, where I had a smaller connector. They're connected together. I really love these connectors. It works great with these battery terminals. It's really tight. Love it. I'm going to put that 4-gauge into here, and then I'm going to run it around and then over to the other side where we have that splitter at. So that's what I'm going to do now. Cut it to length and then run the wire. Figure out how I want to attach it. Either zip ties or some, if I can find some little snap-on connectors, I'll use those. So now we're gonna run a 4-gauge wire to the alternator, and that's gonna be what charges the battery. Is the alternator will connect here and that will go to the battery. Pretty much the same setup we had before, but thicker gauge wire. But I am gonna have the relay for the fan coming out of this, connecting into the side of here. I think that's the only thing that we have that will connect into here. So it's not gonna have a huge pull from the alternator. Ideally, you want a 4-gauge going all the way to the battery and then another wire coming back to your relays and all that kind of stuff. But it's kind of the same effect whenever you tee it off, as long as you don't have too many things coming directly from your alternator. I think this is going to work fine. If it doesn't, then all I have to do is undo the relay from here and just have this wire connected directly to the alternator, and it's the same current as if you're running a straight wire there. So then we would just run an additional wire to the relays. Right now I'm going to see if this works out. Kind of like how clean it looks there. You'll never see this. There'll be that cap that's hiding this. The relay for the fan will be right here. You'll never see that wiring. I haven't decided if I want to do the horn. If I wanted to do the horn, all I would need to do is run a bolt through here into the horn, and I think I could mount it here. We'll see once I get the relay for the fan and all the other connectors in here. We'll see how much room we have, and if we can run the horn, then that's fine. So just to trace back here, I've ran the 4-gauge from this connector all the way around the battery to right here. It runs up. I've got some zip ties just on the back side here holding that nice and tight. That comes down and connects into this. Really good connection there, super clean. You won't see those wires the way the caps look. Now we'll run the wire to the alternator. We'll run a wire to the relay for the fan, and then we'll be good to go. This is looking really good. I'm excited to see how it turns out. The paint is almost dry on the backside. Wow, look at the difference in that. I can't wait to show a before and after of just how clean that engine bay looks now in that area. So I used one of those nice connectors that I have and put it on the 4-gauge wire, and I've got that connected to the alternator now. Now I'm gonna run this wire along the wiring harness here all the way to the splitter, and then once I have that all set, then I can begin to run my wire loom, clean everything up, move the other wires in through there, put my grommet in there. So we'll continue on. This is looking awesome. So I got the wires loomed, got those connected into the alternator, ran. I've got the hole drilled, the grommet is in there, the wires are ran to the front. Look at that difference, wow. How clean it is. Still gonna get some of those little things that you pop into holes. I'll probably get just an assorted kit because I need some of those for the firewall as well. There's a few little holes. So just so you see, focus there. There's the wires that are ran through. Here's the wire from the alternator. That's gonna go into here. I have one wire for the fan relay, and I forgot I have one more wire that goes to the gauges. So that's it. I'm gonna put those into these little things here. I'm gonna mount that relay to the side, and we're gonna test it out, see what we got. So it's kind of dark in here, but just a recap of what I've been doing. I mounted this Airlift controller. I still have to unbolt this and twist it around. I'll do that. I was just test fitting everything and getting it bolted up. So that's where, this is the switch suspensions bracket that I was talking about, and it flips up and it hides and it flips down like that. I've got my switch right there that'll turn on the Airlift. I like to always have my Airlift controller and the compressor and everything on a switch so I can turn it off. That way there's just not a super drain to the battery if your tank is empty. So I don't want, when I start up my truck, every single electrical thing to turn on at the same time. So that's a drain on the battery. So what I'll do is I'll start my vehicle, then I'll just hit this down, and then my compressors will kick on and all the air ride stuff will happen. Another thing I like to have on a switch is the fans. So this other switch right here, that's my electric fans. Again, when I first start my vehicle up, I don't want my fans to turn on automatically, my air ride, all that kind of stuff. And the reason I don't use a temperature on the electric fan is I like to have control of those fans. I've ran into a couple issues where the fans didn't kick on, and I like to know that the fans are either on or off with these two controls. So that's the only toggle switches that I have. That's the only toggle switches that I've had in the past couple trucks, is to control the fans, control the compressors, and that's the main two things that are going to drain your battery. Everything else, the Sniper EFI, it turns on automatically. I've got the vintage air system there that'll turn on. So quick recap, we started out with the horn and all that kind of stuff there, cleaned all that up. We ran the new alternator 4-gauge wire. Got all the wire hooked up. Earlier we installed that 200 amp alternator, LA Electric. And then we ran our wires through the core support. And then we used one of these splitters here to run all the way to the battery, and then also to have our fan relay and one line that goes to the fuse box there, which typically on newer vehicles they have a connector on the back of the alternator that goes to the fuse box. At least that's what my LS motor was. So this is very similar to the same setup. It's almost exactly the same setup that I had on the last truck, but this one's a lot nicer with the splitter and with the relays mounted all here. I'm gonna mount that cover piece over all this. I touched it up with some paint since I had it all off. I bought some new washers just to clean it up, but man, it's made a huge difference. I bought some of those little hole fillers, the little push rivet things. I'm gonna try to fill as many holes as I can, but overall I'm happy. Everything works, everything looks good. We also installed these battery connectors and ran our wires. I'm going to really secure all these later on, probably do that tomorrow. It's getting late now, but the main part of it is done. It looks a lot cleaner. Again, that's how I ran the power through here with a grommet, and then just up and over to here. So since I already had this piece off, I just put a fresh coat of satin black on it, and then the washers that were on it were just black and the paint was flaking off of them. So I just went and got some new washers just to freshen it up. You know, as you take things apart, take advantage of that time that the parts are off of it and try to freshen them up just a little bit, especially if it's things like this. I can easily paint this. I just wiped it down, painted it. It's not a big deal. I love all these details. You can see on the old one here. So I'll go through and I'll replace the washers on all the other ones as well. all the little details matter. That's what stands out. So I just bought a huge assortment of all these little push-in things to fill the holes. So I'm just gonna go through and try to fill as many of these holes as I can.